Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Sāmaṇera Nipako, and today we'll be going over Majjhima-nikāya 41, which goes over the 10 core practices for lay people. So, hello to Rebecca and to Cows, our friend, and to anybody who may check into this talk in the future. We'll begin by paying homage to the Buddha 3 times, the reason why we're all gathered here today, and then we will get started. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. All right, so as stated, today we'll be going over Majjhima-nikāya 41. If you would like, there is a link to Bhante Sujato's translation in the description. So, at the beginning of the sutta, basically the Buddha arrives in a Brahmin village named Sala, and they hear that he's there, so they decide to go see him, and they ask him the following question: What is the cause, worthy Gotama? What is the reason why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell? And what is the cause, or the Gotama? What is the reason why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm? So you'll see a similar question to this elsewhere in the sutta sometimes in a shorter form, which is basically asking the Buddha what is skillful and what is unskillful. What will be for my long-term benefit or long-term harm? And if we don't think that we're going to realize arahantship, or at the bare minimum, one of the 4 stages of awakening, this is a really important question so that we can continue to practice the Dhamma in the future. And in this life, this is extremely important because this ends up giving us the foundation for those stages of awakening. Most of the things that are in this list that we're about to go over aren't anything most lay people haven't heard. Anybody that's been practicing for maybe even a couple of weeks, I would say, has heard most of what the Buddha is about to say. And they like to brush this stuff under the rug, like it doesn't count, or, oh, I can do that later. And they really belittle it. But this is the foundation for anybody, not just lay people, but for anybody to realize awakening. This list is not sufficient. There is more than just this list that would be necessary, or that is needed. Is absolutely necessary. So it's necessary, but not sufficient. So the Brahmins then respond to the Buddha's response there. We don't understand the detailed meaning of the worthy Gotama's brief statement. Worthy Gotama, please teach us this matter in detail so we can understand the meaning. Well then, householders, listen and apply your mind well. I will speak. Yes, worthy sir, they replied. The Buddha said this: Householders, unprincipled and immoral conduct is threefold by way of body, fourfold by way of speech, and threefold by way of mind. So we have the 3 ways in which we can have kamma: body, speech, and mind. And this sutta doesn't say 10, Instead, it breaks it down into these um, three different distinct features in the ways in which you can act immorally. And that combined gets you to 10. So, and how is unprincipled and immoral conduct threefold by way of body? It's when a certain person kills living creatures. They're violent, bloody handed, a hardened killer, merciless to living beings. What I really appreciate about this translation Bhante Sujato has here is he states living creatures. Sometimes people will argue about the term sentient, which usually I see sentient beings or sentient creatures or something along that line. Or when people talk about this, which is the first precept, people will, of course, mention you shouldn't kill people. That's bad. And often, but not always, they'll also mention that this involves all other living creatures, including the inconvenient ones. And sometimes that can be very, very difficult. So, something I like to say in regards to this when people bring up what if questions is this is where preventative maintenance is really important. So, a common one is people ask, what if I have ants in my kitchen? I can't get rid of them. Or I have this creature or that creature that's a problem. For something like ants, they're a symptom. We have had ant problems here at the monastery um, pretty much as long as I've been coming. And if the kitchen is spotless, if the people who are currently in charge of taking care of it really do their due diligence, and we also keep sweet things like some of the allowables either in the refrigerator or in containers that the ants can't get into, they're not a problem. If we make sure there's no scum in the sink or on the counters, there's no problem. If we make sure that the moat for Teddy's food is high enough so that the ants can't get to his food bowl, it's not a problem. But if one ant finds that we weren't keeping our due diligence, we have an army. So, for a lot of these problems, there's preventative maintenance. And if you do keep your due diligence, especially for something that would be much more difficult to take care of, then you don't have to worry about this. Um, and other times, if something is more difficult, that's where you can approach somebody that knows more about these things and find a non-violent, non-bloody handed way to try and deal with the problem. So, preventative maintenance, it really goes a long way. And I would say that applies to most things, though often that means preventative maintenance by treating your mind, but we'll get to the mind later. So, next is they steal with the intention to commit theft. They take the wealth or belongings of others from village or wilderness. Something I think is beautiful is at the monastery, I see people leave their purses, their bags, their wallets, their money on Saturday or Sunday just around the place. They trust that the people here will not steal their stuff. If they forgot something, which people have forgotten wallets and other things here, when they come back, they always get it. I can't think, other than other monasteries, anywhere else where something like this would happen. So, this is something really beautiful. And as we continue to go through this, this will be a reoccurring theme. By following these 10 practices, you're providing safety for the people and other beings around you. So that's no small thing. There's a lot of insecurity, there's a lot of threats, there's a lot of danger in samsara, and you don't have to be one of them. Somebody could leave a $100 bill on our front doorstep for a week or even longer, and when they came back, they would be able to get it. That's truly beautiful. And another thing I think is worth mentioning as well is as I'm reading these, the Buddha is saying the ways in which they are unwholesome. And I'm talking about how they can become wholesome. So, unprincipled and immoral conduct, how do we make it moral? So, I just want to clear that up just in case there's any confusion about, well, I'll read a negative and then speak about a positive. So, the next one, they commit sexual misconduct. They have sexual relations with women or men who have their mother, father, both mother and father, brother, sister, relatives, or clan as guardian. They have sexual relations with a woman or man or anyone else who is protected on principle, or who has a husband or wife or partner, or whose violation is punishable by law, or even one who has been garlanded as a token of betrothal. This is how unprincipled and immoral conduct is threefold by way of body. So, this one I also think has a special mention because sometimes people will ask, what is sexual misconduct? Because of how other religions and how I would say whatever culture they're from in general defines it. And here it is. It basically comes down to consent, not having relations with people that are minors, not having relations with people that are in a committed relationship, or anything else that would violate a boundary of the person that you want to have relations with, or the boundary of somebody that they are already in a relationship with. So, the definition for sexual misconduct is really quite simple and down to earth compared to how many other religions will present it in terms of a whole smorgasbord of things. And to recap here, the threefold by way of body is by killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. So three of the five precepts have already been covered. And how is unprincipled and immoral conduct fourfold by way of speech? It's when a certain person lies. They're summoned to a council, an assembly, a family meeting, a guild, or to the royal court and asked to bear witness. Please, worthy man, say what you know. Not knowing, they say, I know. Knowing, they say, I don't know. Not seeing, they say, I see. And seeing, they say, I don't see. So they deliberately lie for the sake of themselves or another, or for some trivial worldly reason. So, another precept, which is a great way to start out immoral conduct by speech. Another thing to mention about that as well is the precept is just about lying. It is as bare bones and simple for keeping all of these as possible. There are so many ways to do unwholesome things that don't technically break this precepts. And the other three ways in which you can have immoral conduct by speech are a good example of that. They are not covered under lying. So by engaging in them, you're not breaking a precept, but it is still unwholesome behavior. So while it's good to take on the precept of not lying, it is bonus points to also take on the additional three. As speaking from my own experience, anyway, if I do the other three, I am more likely to make conditions where I would have been willing to lie about something. So if you take away the conditions where you're willing to lie, whatever they may be, you are less likely to make it happen or to have these other unwholesome ways of speaking come up. So they speak divisively. They repeat in one place what they heard in another, so as to divide people against each other. And so they divide those who are harmonious, supporting division, delighting in division, longing or loving division, speaking words that promote division. So basically, engaging in gossip. If you ever find yourself wanting to gossip, or if you're somebody that does engage in it quite frequently, something you can think of is how hurtful it is when someone gossips about you. How would it feel if someone tried to divide you and your friends or your family? That would hurt a lot. So, how would it feel if, likewise, you are speaking about somebody in a way that causes division? If something needs to be brought up because there is a problem, there is a way to address it in which is not gossip. And if you're unsure how to do that, this is another situation where you can approach somebody who you think can add some wisdom to the situation so that you can handle it more skillfully. Next, they speak harshly. They use the kind of words that are cruel, nasty, hurtful, offensive, bordering on anger, not leading to immersion. So, again, this is speech that is really hurtful, and it is a great way to cause division. When people are hurt, they're more likely to act unskillfully out of body, speech, and mind. So, by just not speaking harshly, if something is starting to get heated or already is heated, then this is a way to help at least not escalate the problem. And this can be super, super hard. But if you've ever been successful in doing this, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It really, really makes a big difference in making or breaking a conversation. And if something needs to be discussed, this is also more likely that someone's going to actually listen to you. If you open a bad news sandwich without the um, productive sides of it, with immediately criticizing them, or potentially opening it up nicely, but then moving on to speech that's just not something they can hear, it's not going to be productive. So, harsh speech, there are times where it might be necessary, but you need to have a lot of wisdom for that. So, it's not something that I would usually recommend. They talk nonsense. Their speech is untimely and is neither factual nor beneficial. It has nothing to do with the teaching or the training. Their words have no value and are untimely, unreasonable, rambling, and pointless. This is how unprincipled and immoral conduct is fourfold by way of speech. So, how many times have you had somebody that just talks your ear off? You go, mm hmm, yeah, how nice, cool, really, wow. Whatever verbal cue you're trying to say that I don't really have an interest in this, or I don't want to be part of this conversation, and they just keep on going. I'm sure we've all been there, and I'm sure we've all been that person. It's a way of wasting people's time, and it's not wholesome. No value, untimely, unreasonable, rambling, pointless. And something I think is especially worth noting here is it has nothing to do with the teaching or the training. I have seen a lot of people come to the monastery and try to say that what they're discussing is about the teaching or training, but that's really just being held on by a couple of threads, and it really falls underneath this category. So, when you want to talk, is it actually beneficial? Is it actually factual? And does it actually have something to do with the teaching training? And be really honest with yourself about that. And if you're not sure, then that's a good time to find clarity. Somebody who you think will be honest with you about, yeah, actually, at least the direction you're coming from, I think, is nonsense, sampapalapa. However, if we discuss it in this way, that can make it productive. This one in particular, I think, is a trap for a lot of people in that nonsense is so easy to talk and it's so easy to tell ourselves that it's important because we either have aversion to silence or we want to get to know somebody or whatever the particular manifestation may be. It is so easily to talk nonsense, and the nonsense can fall under any of those other categories as well. And likewise, honestly. So, to summarize this again, what are the fourfold ways of speech for it to be unwholesome? Lying, speaking divisively, speaking harshly, and talking nonsense. So, how is unprincipled and immoral conduct threefold by way of mind? It's when a certain person is covetous. They covet the wealth and belongings of others. Oh, if only their belongings were mine. They have ill will and malicious intentions. May these sentient beings be killed, slaughtered, slain, destroyed, or annihilated. They have wrong view. Their perspective is distorted. There is no meaning in giving sacrifice or offerings. There is no fruit or result of good and bad deeds. There is no afterlife. There is no such thing as mother and father or beings that are reborn spontaneously. And there is no such ascetic or Brahmin who is rightly comported and rightly practiced and who describes the afterlife after realizing it with their own insight. This is how unprincipled and immoral conduct is threefold by way of mind. So, something about all three here is if you pay attention to how they manifest in the mind, they're really, really uncomfortable. The mind is also the forerunner in actions. So, if you're covetous, if you have ill will and malicious intentions, if you have a wrong view, then you're very likely to make those wrong actions out of body and speech. For example, if you have ill will, then you may really think, may these beings be harmed, and maybe you don't want them killed, slaughtered, slain, destroyed, or annihilated, but you can definitely wish all sorts of harm on other beings without wishing their death. If you don't have that ill will, you won't have that sort of intention arise. If you don't have that ill will, you won't kill those annoying ants in your kitchen. If you don't have ill will, you won't inflame your annoying uncle at Thanksgiving. If you don't have ill will, you won't try to make things difficult for a coworker you don't like. If you don't have ill will, you won't try to make things more difficult for yourself. If you don't have covetousness, you won't try to steal. And wrong view in particular, there are all sorts of immoral things that can come out of wrong view. And right view is the forerunner of the Noble Eightfold Path. Even if it's just mundane right view, without that, it is so incredibly difficult to really parse out what is right and wrong, especially these days where there's a huge attention economy and you might find yourself in a bubble where everyone has convinced you this type of thought, this type of deed is wholesome and good, but really it's not wholesome and good. It involves a lot of ill will or covetousness or hate or violence or whatever it may be. In the Buddha's time and today, there's no shortage of people trying to sell a particular viewpoint, a particular way of living that they say is wholesome, but it's not for their short term or their long term benefit or the people around them. So, if you find that you are often in these traps of immoral conduct by mind, you might find that you also fall into the traps of the other ones quite a lot as well. So sometimes people think, how can I start to work through this immoral conduct with the mind? With the other ones, I see the impact of my actions. If I hurt somebody, I see it. If I steal something, I know that somebody's going to miss this thing. Maybe I don't regret it, but I know that somebody is going to be sad that they no longer have this thing that I stole. This is where reflecting on your actions in all three of these can be beneficial. And often it ends up falling back onto sense restraint because if you are breaking these, that means there is a lack of wisdom, a lack of knowing the drawback of following through with these different types of unwholesome behavior. So, if you have a routine where you are sitting to meditate in the morning or the evening or whenever you do it, one way you can start it, end it, or even spend the whole time doing is reflecting on your deeds that day. Where did I act unwholesomely? Where did I act wholesomely? And why? And it's okay if you don't get an answer. If you act in an unwholesome way and you don't know why you did it, you don't know what made you break the precept or sense restraint or whatever caused you to act out in that way, that's still good. That's an acknowledgement of I did something unwholesome. There is wisdom in that. There's also wisdom in knowing I don't know why I acted out of the unwholesome. That sets the ground, that sets the ability for the more you reflect on this, the more you'll be able to see. And you can't force it. These are the types of things that are going to take however long they take, but the more you do it, the more the muscle will grow. The more you examine it, the more you will see. While right now, certain things might be looking at Pluto through a telescope, there might come a time where you've examined something enough where it's like you have a microscope. You can see all the features and details without any problem. And as you continue to grow in this way, that means at some point you'll decide to not do the unwholesome deed. You'll abstain from it and either not do anything at all or you'll do something wholesome instead. So when you do any of these 10 things by body, speech, or mind, you can at least be like, hey, okay, at least I can turn this into a situation where I can learn from it. If I don't understand it, I'm going to continue to make these mistakes. The reason I don't understand it is why I made this mistake in the first place. Great. I can develop my wisdom now. I can begin to understand what's going on. So don't beat yourself too much about this if something happens. I think everyone that's not at least some stage of awakening, and even some that are at some stage, they can make mistakes as well. That doesn't mean they're going to not do anything unwholesome. So, where can I learn? What are my habits? What are my patterns? How can I be kind to myself? How can I not have that ill will of mind towards myself as I am learning and growing in this way? I talk about patience a lot, and this is a good opportunity to bring it up again as well. Patience is such a good antidote to ill will and a very, very difficult one. I talked about that more in my talk last week, if that is something that people would be interested in hearing a little more about in more detail, but it's always worth bringing up. Patience is the hardest austerity, and that same word kanti also means forgiveness. So forgiveness is another very difficult practice. So then the Buddha basically goes through this same 10 list, but talks about it in the positive. So, for example, instead of killing, they give up killing living creatures, they give up stealing, they give up sexual misconduct, and so on. So at the end of this, the Buddha mentions someone of principled and moral conduct might wish, if only when my body breaks up after death, I would be reborn in the company of well to do aristocrats. It's possible that this might happen. Why is that? Because they have principled and moral conduct. So, this first one here, by maintaining these 10 ways of having principled and moral conduct, it is necessary and sufficient to be reborn in the company of well to do aristocrats. And the list continues: well to do Brahmins, well to do householders. And likewise, it is necessary and sufficient for householders and Brahmins. But then once you start to get into the higher realms, so such as, I'll just read through the list. The gods of the four great kings, the gods of the 33, the gods of Yama, the joyful gods, the gods who love to create, the gods who control what is created by others. And then once you get to the gods of divinity's host, rebirth in higher realms like this is said to depend not just on these 10 skillful deeds, but also on jhana. And what's important here is that if you don't have these 10 basic ways of acting in a principled and moral way, you're not going to be attaining jhana or any other high state of meditation anyway. In the event that somebody did want to be reborn as a Brahma and so on through the list, they have to act in a way that's wholesome. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. Now, to emphasize it again, it is necessary but not sufficient for these higher realms of rebirth. Another thing worth noting as well is that these higher states of rebirth, so the Brahmas, and I'll read through the rest of the list now, the gods of the divinity's host, the radiant gods, the gods of limited radiance, the gods of limitless radiance, the gods of streaming radiance, the gods of limited beauty, the gods of limitless beauty, the gods of universal beauty, the gods of abundant fruit, the gods of aviha, the gods of atapa, the gods fair to see, the fair seeing gods, the gods of akanita, the gods of the dimension of infinite space, the gods of the dimension of infinite consciousness, the gods of the dimension of nothingness, the gods of neither perception nor non perception. So, from divinity's host up to there, in any of these higher states of rebirth, they're not the point. We are a pleasant abiding that can last a really, really, really unfathomably long amount of time, but they don't last forever. We know of gods like Saka, which are in the gods of 33, which on this list are very close to humans. And he is a stream enterer. So if we're in a position that is comfortable, but not so far away that should a Buddha appear, or should we remember our practice in this life or other lives, we don't feel uninclined to do it. Even Saka, I forget which sutta it is, but I'm pretty sure it's in the Majjhima-nikāya. Mahamoggallana visits him after he has a talk with the Buddha. And immediately after the talk, he basically forgets the teaching until he is pressed repeatedly by Mahamoggallana. So even Saka, who is a stream enterer and a devoted student of the Buddha, is very easily distracted by the various pleasures in the heavenly realm. So if you're somewhere that's much, much higher up and you wouldn't even be paying attention to what beings like us are doing, and you're just in a complete realm of pleasure, there's going to be no reason to practice. So ideally, if you're aiming for one of these, you'll want to aim for a realm that's comfortable but not too comfortable. And just to say it one more time, for the higher gods, if you want something like that, you're going to need jhana. So if you want jhana, you need really good moral conduct. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And what I also think is great about this is it's a really, really reasonable way for lay people to practice. Even if you're somebody who finds that they usually can't find time to meditate, or they often can't come to the monastery either because they live really far away or other obligations or whatever it may be, you can always find ways to apply this in your life. You can always recollect when you followed them well. You can recollect when you didn't follow them well. And you can grow from that. Even if you don't have people nearby that you can reflect on these things with, you have people like this community and others as well you can connect with for advice on this. This is such an accessible practice that the Buddha has offered to this group of lay people. No matter who you are, no matter where you live, you can do this. It might not be easy. In fact, it'll often be hard, especially if this is something new or if we have a really strong pattern. But you can always do it. And how amazing is that? A no nonsense, down to earth, accessible, simple practice. No bells and whistles, no bands, no music. Plain and simple. Easy to understand. So this is a sutta that I really recommend going over, remembering these sorts of things, catching yourself when you're doing them, because it will build a really strong foundation for your practice, no matter what it looks like in this life and in lives to come. So at this point, I'm going to respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I will see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So hello, Rebecca. Cow's our friend. Um, Shamashel, Uttara, Christopher, Yankee Apple, Bhumika, Gregory, Jayanta. So I see one question from Christopher. Since it's not related to today's topic, I recommend that you bring that to Monk Chat. Funnily enough, one thing I will say about this question, though, is with jhana, there is debate on this. It is agreed across the board that it is required for arahantship, but I have seen different arguments about if it is required for the previous 3 states of awakening. But this is quite a big topic, so other than that brief answering of what the landscape is like, I won't get into it. There will be more time, space, and appropriate for it at Monk Chat. That has been moved, if you don't know. It is at 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time on Fridays. So then Rebecca asks, it seems easy to fall into worry and preoccupation about the next lifetime, which is similar to other faiths. How to have confidence and not fall into anxiety about future lives? So this is a really good question. So A way that I have worked with this in the past is I reflect, am I doing my best? Am I genuinely trying to have wholesome behavior by body, speech, and mind? And if overall the answer is yes, then that's good. The other thing, too, is if we get too anxious about future lives, that can make us act out in unwholesome ways out of anxiety. Anxiety in general is a great emotion to make us make unwholesome actions by body, speech, and mind. Speaking from my own experience, anyway. So instead, reflect on what you have been doing well. Fall into that ease and happiness of the fact you're really genuinely trying to be a good person. Even as somebody who has had a lot of really bad behavior in their lifetime, like maybe there's somebody who really, really messed up and ended up in jail. Think of like Angulimala. I am pretty sure you have not murdered 999 people and wear their fingers as a necklace around your neck. So, Angulimala became an arahant. You're already better off than where he was in terms of bad actions. If he hadn't become an arahant, he would have had a really, really bad rebirth. I've spent quite a lot of time with you here at the monastery, and I don't think you have to worry personally. You are a very wholesome, dedicated, warm, kind person who I'm always happy to see come here. And you can reflect on that. I have all these good qualities. I can be easeful about that and know I have some work to do. That's why we're all here. If we didn't have unwholesome qualities, if we didn't have work to do, we wouldn't have to do this practice. And another thing that I will do sometimes as well, if this sort of anxiety will pop up for me, is I will think about how I've already been there. If the Buddha is correct and the samsaric cycle has been going on for an unfathomable amount of time, I've done everything except the pure abodes and being a Buddha. So, all right, that sucks. I guess I might go to a VC for the next 10 aeons because of something I did many lifetimes ago. Been there before. Here I am now. Maybe I'm really, really good in this lifetime and I don't um, become awakened, but I get jhana or something, which I haven't, by the way. But let's say I do. All right, I get to be a Brahma for the next 10 aeons. Great, but that's going to end too. Been there before. Here I am now in human rebirth, and I don't remember any of that. So if it happens, what can you do? This is why we create wholesome conditions in the current life to be able to hopefully awaken and have conditions for awakening either in this life or in future lives. That's the important thing. There's going to be ups and downs the whole rest of the way. And those ups might be really, really big, and those downs might be really, really deep. And that's okay. Right now, you can continue to be a wholesome, moral person and keep doing what you're doing. That's the practice. And there's so many people that don't. There's even a lot of people that say that they're Buddhist and they don't really do anything that is conducive towards awakening. It's good that they've taken refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. That's no small thing. But there's a lot more to practice than just that. So rejoice in your good deeds. Keep at it. If you're ever falling in a spiral, remember that Venerable said that they think you're doing a good job. Keep doing what you're doing. Maybe that'll help lift you up a little bit. But there's not much you can do other than continue to make wholesome conditions. Keep doing that and you'll be all right and you won't have anything to worry about. So, Josh Lost in Time says, I have a hard time following the precept against intoxicants. I've been a marijuana user for 30 plus years, so it's hard to stay away from it. Do you have any recommendations how to stop in the moment? So, Josh, one of the things that comes to mind is if this is a habit that's non medical, which I'm guessing is the problem here, you might want to consider who the people you associate with are. So, for example, if you have friends that are a bunch of potheads, then as difficult as it may be, you might need to find new associates. Another thing is if you are using it as non prescribed medicine, then if you have the accessibility to find a doctor that works with whatever is the underlying cause for your marijuana use, then you could go do that. Another thing as well is there are many doctors these days who are prescribing a certain amount of marijuana for medical reasons. So it's not enough to get high or any of the other more fun aspects that people will experience when using marijuana, but because it's a low dose and from a doctor, it's still able to address the symptoms. So you're going to have to be honest about what the problem is, and maybe you don't know. And this could also be where you also seek outside help of either a mental health professional, or if you can come to a monastery, you could discuss in more detail about what's going on. And while the monastics might not have the expertise to be able to give really specific advice, they could at least help you parse out what is going on. Because sometimes this stuff is really hard to figure out. And if it's somebody that you can trust, that can allow you to be more vulnerable. And sometimes when we feel that safety and vulnerability, we can see things that we're normally hiding. Another thing that you could do as well is just start to taper. So I have a family member, I actually have a couple family members who have a similar problem. And for one of them, they did exactly this. They found out what the problem was, they changed their friends, and they haven't gone back at all. It was a very difficult but seamless transition for them. I have another family member who, because they keep the same associates or very similar people, even though the individuals might change, they'll stop using weed for like 3 to 6 months and then they come back and then they stop and then they come back. So with him, it's a large part is these sorts of conditions. So something I've recommended is okay, if you want to continue to be with these people, if you find that they cause more positive than negative things in your life, one thing you can do is just start to reduce. Instead of smoking 5 times a day, why don't you try smoking 4 times a day? Instead of smoking 4 times a day, why not move it down to 3 times a day? So taper it. Realistically, if this is something that you're really, really dependent on, it's not something you're going to be able to change overnight. It might take months or years sometimes. I know that other substance abuse problems like alcohol, it can take a really, really long time. And even once somebody has been clean for a very long time, if that was a strong habit they had, just seeing it or like with cigarettes, smelling it can be enough to trigger that urge. So also being honest and reasonable with yourself. Be patient with yourself. I know this is a problem. I'm going to try out different things. I know I'm going to to falter because I have in the past. I know I'm going to have a tough time, but I am going to try anyway. And the fact that you're trying counts for a lot. So, without knowing you better, I can't suggest anything more specific than these sort of things. But our outside support systems or lack thereof really, really do make a big difference. It is hard to not pick up the negative and the positive aspects of the people around us. So, wishing you best of luck, Josh, with this. And keep up. Don't be too hard on yourself. Keep at it. It's really, really beautiful that you're trying to work through whatever it is that is causing the 30 plus years of use that you have. And then Cows, our friend, asks, should we encourage others around us, even non Buddhists, to also take up this practice? So for this, you got to be careful because you don't want anybody to feel like you are preaching to them. I have tried this and it usually doesn't work. There are some people who will be willing to pick this up without being a Buddhist. But most likely, if that's the case, then they are some sort of other religion or spiritual but not religious type of person. So they're more inclined to this type of behavior anyway. If you find that if someone is a repeat offender of these sort of things and you try to encourage them, they're probably not going to listen. So, what I would do is with some friends that I had or family members, coworkers, anyone that I knew I spent a lot of time with, either by choice or by circumstance, and that I had limited control over, which is really everybody, if you think about it, but differing amounts, is I would act by example. So, to use one of my friends, for example, as adulthood started to get difficult, they actually found themselves in a similar situation as what Josh is describing. They were having a lot of substance abuse issues, and it was starting to get worse and worse to the point where me and the other people in the friend group were starting to get a little bit worried about them, that it was no longer within the medical sphere that they were claiming. So in this case, what we did is we did talk to them about it a little bit, but we didn't tell them to stop. In that case, we just expressed our concerns and we showed through our behavior how we worked through these similar types of stressors, because many of us had similar things going on, but we were responding to them differently. So we showed in the flesh a healthy way to deal with these sort of problems, which just happened to align with these sorts of moral behavior. Another family member of mine, and you've probably heard me say this before in other talks, whenever I speak about speech, is I come from a very, very fiery and explosive family. I'm Irish Italian. So all you need is one little disagreement and push, you go from a match to a bonfire. So I started to adopt these forms of speech, including knowing when to be quiet, which is the hard part. So finding ways to act by example. So with this family member, with that friend, and with coworkers, the way I saw these people interact with me was different than how I saw them interact with other people. And slowly, 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 I'm talking about years, slowly, 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 the way I saw them start to interact with other people started to change as well. So sometimes the best way you can encourage people to take up these types of practices is to be an example. to be safe, to show that this actually works, that you don't have to do all the unwholesome things to be okay on this earth. And that is such a gift. And it can also be very hard, but very courageous. So, yes, encourage others through your own example. Be wholesome by body, speech, and mind. And it really does have an effect. Maybe really, really slow, sometimes intolerably slow. But just like how drips of water will eventually fill up a bucket, likewise, your actions can have an impact on how people change in the long run. So that's the last question I see, and we're just about up with time. So thank you everyone for attending today. May you all be happy, well, peaceful. May this all be a good foundation for your practice and your continued practice. It's really no small thing that you're all interested in this. To tie back to Rebecca's question, don't fear your next rebirth because you're already doing so many wonderful, beautiful things that a lot of people aren't. The world needs more people like you all who, regardless of where you are trying. So may we all always have access to the Dhamma, affinity to practice the Dhamma, always be reborn where the Dhamma is available, and may we soon realize the threefold bliss. And you can also take this opportunity to share the merit of your practice today with your loved ones, past, present, and future, live and deceased, so that they too can rejoice in this wonderful deed you've done now by joining this talk. So until next time, everybody, may you be well.